Hi friends, I have a deck for us to look at today, and just some thoughts before I do that on how I'm going to handle my deck discussions going forward. So I posted on Instagram this morning, you may have noticed that one of the things I've started doing when I get a new deck in the mail, or if I happen to purchase it, is I go through and I sort of create piles to see what the representation ratio is like. And essentially what I mean by that is, what's the ratio of white passing faces to all other cultures? And very, very, very few decks come, with what I think in current life should really be a ratio of probably, I would say, in an ideal situation, probably a third to a quarter of the deck would feature white passing faces, and the rest of the deck would feature all the various cultures and communities across the globe. The current ratio is actually generally the reverse. So unless it's a themed deck, then it generally features maybe about a third to a quarter people of color. So what I'm going to do when I talk about decks going forward is I'm just going to give it a rating based on that ratio, so that because I think this is an important thing, and I think it's something that I'm going to keep harping on, so get used to it. And it's a tricky balancing act. I have moments where I think, well, unless a deck really has at least 50-50 representation, then I'm not going to review it. But on the other side of the coin, there are decks out there that the artists are making an attempt. I don't think the attempts go far enough in a lot of cases, but I want to have that discussion. So I would give this deck about a B minus C plus. So this is definitely one where about a third, probably slightly more than a third of the cards feature people of color. Now they're not specifically located, so they're what I would call sort of generically people of color rather than specifically people of color. But this is a little bit of a fantasy deck. It has a little bit of a childlike quality to it in a good way, so that's something to consider. But I would say that it gets about a B minus C plus. Now I'm being really hard on decks these days, because I do think that the ratio of the people on the world should be reflected in the cards. And what I said on Instagram this morning was that anyone who is a person of color, who is not a cis white heterosexual person, anyone who has various physical disabilities or abilities, should not be pleasantly surprised when they find themselves represented in the deck or a spread of cards, but they should expect it. And so what I want is, when I pull a 3-card spread, not to be surprised that there's a representation from across the spectrums. I want to expect that. Okay. And so I think when the ratio is so low, now this deck is higher than a lot of even quote diverse decks, so I'm going to give it that. But as I look at decks, I'm gonna start with that and say, here's my opinion on its ratio of representation. So what I really want to start seeing is decks where I can pull a spread of 3 cards and see, anyone, rather than have the expectation that it's probably gonna feature all or mostly all white faces. All right. So from a diversity standpoint, I would give this about a B minus. This is a Kickstarter deck. It's called the Tower of Little Secrets, and the artist's name is inside on the booklet, so I'll talk about that in a second. So I backed this, I don't even know how long ago. I think it was about the fall, and I didn't know it had shipped, so I didn't expect it to come in, but it arrived. I saw that a package was coming, and it arrived, and I thought, what is this? And it was this. So from a diversity standpoint, B minus-ish. I think that the artist definitely recognized. I think that I think that there's a push away from tokenism and towards more accurate representation. I think there's more we could do. And so what I would say is, in another edition, let's push it even farther. Let's get like at least 50-50. That said, the art style is very in line with what I love in decks, which is it's very handmade. So I quite like the art style a lot. And it's a really cute deck, and I don't mean cute pejoratively. I mean that it's lovely in a lot of ways. So it comes in a 2-part box. It's not the sturdiest box you've ever seen, but it's it's a nice. It'll take care of the cards. I wouldn't throw this in a bag without an elastic or something. So if you're the type of person like me who just throws a deck of cards in the box in your backpack, this probably isn't going to be a good box to do that with. You would want to either wrap it in something or put an elastic around it. Or put the cards themselves in a pouch of some kind. So the card on the front of the box has the Fool, and the back has the World, and then it's got Tower of Little Secrets on the side. I just looked, it's on Etsy, so it's out there in the world. So there's the box. This is the back of the cards, and it's got gold foiling, which it's fine. I don't think it needed it, because I actually feel like it's a little distracting from the lovely art on the back, but it was a stretch goal that got met, so I think that's fine. And then it comes with a little sort of cheat sheet on what the numbers are, so you'll see that the trumps don't have titles, they just have numbers, and the court cards don't have titles, they have a little symbol. So you'll see that the page is a feather, the knight is a horse, the queen has this sort of sharp pointy crown, and the king has this sort of rounded crown. There's an extra card, and I tend to take those out, but it's pretty. And when I look at the little guidebook in a second, I'll tell you what that is. So I'll do a quick walkthrough of it. It's very Rider-Waite-Smith. So I think if you work with a Rider-Waite-Smith system, this won't be a stretch. I will say that as I was putting the deck back in order, because I worked with it a little bit this morning, I thought the Chariot was the 6 of Wands, or I thought the 6 of Wands was the Chariot, because they're not. I thought it was a mistake because it said 6 on the bottom, and I said, oh shit, like she misnumbered the Chariot, and then I realized that was the 6 of Wands. So there are some like subtleties like that you might just need to get used to. But so it comes with a little white book. This Kickstarter edition at least was signed by the artists, and it talks about the deck a little bit. And one thing that I like is it says at the bottom, every card has at least one hidden image, which I'll try to point some out. But the hidden image, each of the card descriptions has this thing called Little Secret, which is nice because it's called the Tower of Little Secrets, and it's sort of inspired by the hidden image in each. And then there's some themes and symbols that they describe: guardians, clocks, butterflies, eyes and masks, flowers, children and people, and animals. And then it's actually full color, which is nice. There's a little write-up about each of the trumps, and then there's some keywords. So the extra card is called the Source. So that's 22, but I did take that out. Flirt. So there we go. There's a little white book, and then there's a spread in the back. So the art style is mixed media. It has a very sort of painterly quality to it, but there's also some collaging within, which is nice. It's very subtle and very fun, and it does have that handmade quality that I like a lot. So I'll just sort of walk through really quickly so you can get a flavor. Here we have the Fool and the Magician. And I'm just picking this up, like you'll see, I think you can see like these things here. You'll see there's little moments of collaging that sort of add some additional meaning to them. So here's the High Priestess. Some of the cards get a little sort of airy-fairy for me, which isn't my style, but again, I think it fits with the deck and I don't find it too cloying. So there's the Empress. There's the Emperor. The colors, as you can see, are really, really rich. There's a lot of nice depth to the color. Here in the Hierophant, and you'll see other cards like this, sometimes where there's brick walls, you'll see sort of collaging in the bricks. And I think it's interesting, especially if you tend to use tarot in a meditative way, or you really like to get hits, visual hits. Like your eye may, sort of like a magic eye poster, come alive and notice something that it hadn't before. There's the Chariot, your Strength. The Hermit's always a card I look for, and I like that one a lot. There's the Wheel. Not my favorite card in most decks. I like this one. I'm not, Wheel of Fortune cards generally turn me off. Justice card. Pretty traditional. I don't remember seeing anything especially revolutionary, but I love this Death card. I mean, it's just, for a Death card, it's awfully sweet. It's sort of this person being tucked in by a skeleton and a crow. And so I think that this is a deck that would be really appropriate, especially for someone who wants to dip their toe in the water and is a little nervous about traditional Waite-Smith scary cards, so to speak. I don't view any of the cards as particularly scary anymore, because I think everything has light and shadow. But this has a gentleness to it that isn't... that doesn't negate the card meaning, I think. And it tends to revise any kind of spiritual path out of the equation, so it's not super Christian. I'm going to say this about devil cards generally. I find that this is a thing where devil cards are often represented with someone with non-white skin. And oftentimes it's reddish or brownish. And I think that while I understand what the artist is going for, and it's not just this deck, I've seen it a lot, and I think that's problematic because it speaks to deep-held biases in white culture about what evil looks like. You know what I mean? Now, I don't interpret the devil card as evil in particular. Sometimes I do, but it again, every card has light and shadow. And this is not just this deck. I'm raising this because I've seen a trend over the years where I have a Shakespeare tarot that I never use because the devil is Othello. And it's the only black character in all of Shakespeare, and that's the devil. Now, Iago in Othello, if you know, Othello is about as satanic a character as you get, but she chose Othello. I don't know if it was a she or not. The artist chose Othello. So as artists, and I'm going to keep talking about this stuff as the years go on, as long as I have a microphone, artists, consumers, everyone needs to be aware about the subtext of what the choices are. And so I think while this is clearly not, I don't think, meant to be a stereotype, it fits into a narrative that we have to be more careful about as artists, as creators, as readers. So this is maybe not quite as problematic as other devil cards I've seen over the years, but you have to be aware. I mean, if you want to create a devil card that isn't, Caucasian, for example, use blue, use purple, you know what I mean? Use something that doesn't indicate or could be misrepresented by or misinterpreted. If you're going to go in that direction, go farther away from actual skin tones. Here's the Tower. And again, I'm not just talking about this deck. I want to be very clear. If the artist ever watches this, if people who, like this deck, I like this deck. I'm talking across the board about how representation exists in cards in our community. And I'm talking about things that people do without thinking about the consequences of. And so this is a deck that is raising that for me, but it's not the only one. I got actually a couple decks that are on my shelves that I haven't done walkthroughs of, in part because of, I think, really problematic cards. Here's the Moon, the Sun, Judgment. Not my favorite Judgment card, to be honest, but I think this is the only major card that I'm not keen on. And then there's the World. And so we get into the minors. So there's the Ace of Wands. So you can see here, it's all full bleed. There's not really much room. The numbers of each suit are written, the number of each pip is written on the bottom corner in the right. On the trumps, you'll see that it's written on the left in Arabic numerals. So for the most part, you can tell what suit you're looking at because the wands aren't hidden. For example, you know you're looking at wands, you know you're looking at cups. The only one I think I really got confused about was the Six of Wands, which has a chariot in it. You know, cherubs are never my thing, but you know, that's fine. It's the 5. So this was the one I thought was the chariot initially. So it doesn't actually have a chariot, it just looks like that to me. 7. So really Rider-Waite-Smith. Here's another example. You can see a little key. I'm sorry, the little lock there. So there's just little secrets like that all the way through. One thing I liked about this too, and one reason I backed it was called Playful Deck for Troubled Times, which I thought was cute. There's the 9, the 10, and then we have the page with the feather in the corner, the knight with a horse, the queen with the pointy crown, and the king with the round crown. I don't know, I'm sure there's names for those, like a tiara and a coronet. Here's the Ace of Cups, 2 of Cups. You know, again, love to see some more, you know, like non-cis het you know, stuff there, right? Like a same-sex couple, or you know, and genderqueer looking people, but whatever. Again, that's just a thing I'm looking for. You know, I think this is a card that frequently could highlight diversity, and a lot of decks does, and I think that's sort of a missed opportunity in this one. But again, I'm just, you know, I'm not going to stop talking about that stuff, so that's my thought about it. And again, as I said at the beginning, I think this deck does better than a lot of decks I've seen come out in the last year, and I feel like we have to keep having this conversation, we have to keep pushing it, because it's not going to get better if we don't. And it's not the job of people who aren't being represented to say this shit. It's the job of those of us who have always been represented to start banging the drums. There's the 7. The 8. I thought this was actually a mushroom, but now that I see it's a hat, so it's just someone looking off into the distance. I do love the ground in the background. The art style I really like. It's got a very handmade, very nice, like textured, visceral quality to it, and that I think is really cool. And that was, you know, the few cards I saw when the Kickstarter opened made me want to back it. So that was the page. This is the knight. And here's the queen, and here's the king. And then we get to swords. Such subtle little things I think are really cool, and it looks like in the hilt of the sword here, it looks like a high rise. You know, it's got windows in there, which just little details like that I think are really fun and could pop in a reading. Now, you know, 3 of Swords, Rider-Waite-Smith, not my favorite, but there's some keywords in here that are like magazine cutouts. I think that's meant to soften the edge of the card, but I just read that card however I want to. There's the 4 and the 5 and the 6. It's really pretty richness. The 7, the 8, the 9, it's the page, the knight, the queen, and the king. And then we get to pentacles. It's the 2, 3, 4. There's the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the 10. And then we get the page, the knight, the queen, and the king. So I'll zoom out, and the cardstock is thin. It's thin. It doesn't feel flimsy. Like it has a lot of bend to it. but it doesn't, I don't necessarily get the feeling that it's gonna just like rip or bend, like snap or crease easily. And because it is so bendy, it riffle shuffles like super nicely. So I'll shuffle and we'll lay it out a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I honestly could have done without the gold on the back. I think, you know, it's fine. Gold is not my favorite color. So, you know, when I get made fun of by my friends for saying, oh, another gilded deck, it's not that I don't appreciate it. It's just that, you know, I actually love subtler tones, rose golds, even matte golds, silvers, matte silvers are just a little easier on my eyes. This is not a glossy deck though. Cards have matte, you know, it's not super flat, but it's a little, you know, it's a little easier to light for readings. So I really do like the way it shuffles a lot. There's a lot that I like about this pack. And this is probably a deck that I would use, particularly if someone's like, I want a reading, but I'm a little nervous, you know. I mean, how could you be scared of that death card, for example? Alright. So I'm just gonna lay out my usual 9 cards. Can you see all of that? Yeah. It's pretty, right? Let me zoom in a little bit more. I really do like it. I think I like the art style a lot. Just change the light a little bit. That's not really helping much. Anyway, I like the art style a lot. I'm probably going to get shit for saying this. I actually wouldn't have minded a border on these because the cards are so, you know, alive and there's so much color happening in them. I wouldn't have minded a little bit of a frame, but I don't care, you know, that it doesn't have one. I think that they interact nicely with each other. And, yeah. So in a lot of ways, I think this deck really is a success. I think, you know, it's on par with, I think, the most diverse decks that are out there. I think not just this deck, as a community of creators, consumers, we have further to go, and I would like to see us go there faster. But for this particular deck, I think, you know, I do give it a B-, which is not a bad grade, considering, you know. I think that in terms of art style, I really like it. In terms of the quality, I really like it. I don't mind the numbers on the cards. I again would have liked just a little, maybe just a bottom border, because I just think that looks cleaner. And one of the things that I really appreciate with the deck is I want to know which card I'm looking at immediately, because I like to start to get themes, you know, right away. So like in this spread, I'm going to say, okay, you know, I've got the 6 of Pentacles, the 10 of Pentacles, the Page of Pentacles. I've got the Ace of Wands, the Emperor, the Ace of Swords. This is the Queen. It must be of Wands. The Moon. So I just like to sort of get hits immediately and say, okay, this has a majority of Earth cards, so that's going to be a theme that I'm going to think about. There's no Cups, so I'm going to consider that. But I'll consider the Moon, which has a watery feel to it. You know, I'll do all of that. And it just helps me get a sense of what I'm working with. And so, but I didn't find it all that difficult to figure out which cards I'm looking at. So there you have it. This is the really, really lovely, I think it's a nice word for it, Tarot of Little Secrets. The artist is Laura Stamper, so nice job, Laura Stamper, on this beautiful art. The little white book was written by Sam Lofgren. Again, I want to reiterate, the things I'm saying about representation in this deck are not specific to this deck, so I'm not necessarily criticizing the artist in this case. I'm talking about us as a larger community and how we have to ask for more and we have to expect more from everyone. And so there's that. So, yeah. That's that. The Tarot of Little Secrets, a Playful Deck for Troubled Times by Laura Stamper. Hope you enjoyed this.